She had looked at herself in the glass at the coaching inn and made a decision that felt, at the time, entirely reasonable. She would cut her hair. Not all of it, only enough that the curl at her temple would lie differently, the way it had when she was 16 and her mother had been alive to insist upon it. She would wear the brown dress she had bought from a seamstress in Grantley, the one with the mended seam at the left shoulder that the woman had tried to hide by pressing it flat. She would carry no trunk. She would arrive at Ashverton Park on foot from the direction of the village, which was the direction servants arrived from, not guests. She had practiced what she would say. She had stood in front of the inn glass the previous evening and said it aloud, quietly, so the couple in the next room would not hear. "I am here about the companion position." Mrs. Hartwick wrote from the agency. "I am expected." Her name, for the time being, would be Miss Everly. Adelaide Everly. The surname had come to her while watching a woman across the street hang sheets from a window. The sign above the shop beneath the window had read Everly and Sons, drapers. It was not a remarkable name, which was precisely why she had chosen it. Her real name was Isolde Vane Corin. She was 26 years old. Ashverton Park had belonged to her family for 4 generations, and 3 months ago she had learned that it had been signed over, legally, duly, in the presence of a solicitor, to a man she had never met. The housekeeper who met her at the side entrance was a tall woman called Mrs. Dallow, with a face that communicated efficiency before she had spoken a single word. She looked Isolde over, with the particular attention of someone accustomed to assessing people quickly and accurately, and Isolde held still under the inspection and thought about the mended seam and hoped it was doing its work. "Miss Everly," Mrs. Dallow said. It was not quite a question. "Yes, ma'am. You're younger than Mrs. Hartwick usually sends. I have experience nonetheless. 3 years as a companion to Lady Fenmore in Dorset. She passed in January. I have a letter of character if you'd like it." The letter had taken considerable effort. She had written it herself, in a hand that was not her own, on stationery that she had spent half a morning aging with weak tea and a warm iron. She was not proud of this. She told herself it was a means to an end, which was true, but truth and pride were different things, and she had learned to stop confusing them. Mrs. Dallow did not ask for the letter. She looked at Isolde a moment longer, then nodded once and turned toward the corridor. "The Dowager Countess rises at 8 and takes her breakfast in her room. She walks in the garden at 10 if the weather allows. She reads in the afternoon and does not wish to be disturbed between 2 and 4. You will sit with her in the evenings and read aloud when she asks. She is not a difficult woman, but she does not tolerate fussiness." "I am not fussy," Isolde said. Mrs. Dallow glanced back. Something in her expression shifted slightly, and Isolde had the impression that she had passed some secondary test that had not been announced. "The Duke arrives tomorrow," Mrs. Dallow said. "His Grace prefers the house kept to a particular standard when he is in residence. That will mean additional duties for all of us." Isolde said nothing. She had known the Duke would be here. She had timed her arrival for precisely this reason. The house looked the same. This was the thing she had not prepared herself for, not the risk of being recognized, not the difficulty of the deception, but the fact that the rose-colored curtains in the East Passage were the same rose-colored curtains her mother had chosen when Isolde was 7 years old, slightly faded now at the edges, and the smell of the entrance hall was still beeswaxed old stone, and faintly wood smoke, and the 3rd step on the back staircase still creaked in the same place it had always creaked. She walked through the house behind Mrs. Dallow, and kept her face arranged in an expression of mild professional interest. The face of a woman seeing a fine house for the first time and being suitably, but not excessively, impressed. It was perhaps the most difficult acting she had ever done. Her room was in the upper floor of the east wing, small and clean, with a window that looked out over the kitchen garden. She had not been given a room in this part of the house before. As a child, she had lived in the main family rooms, 2 floors below, and half a house away. She stood at the window for a long time after Mrs. Dallow left, looking at the rows of herbs she recognized. Her mother had planted the rosemary herself, saying the house had never had proper rosemary before, and let herself feel for just a moment the full weight of what she was doing. Then she folded it away and went downstairs to meet the Dowager Countess. The Dowager was a woman in her late 70s with white hair and clear gray eyes, and the manner of someone who had once been formidable and had not relinquished any of it with age. Her name was Lady Ashverton, the courtesy title that passed with the estate, and she looked at Isolde with the same directness that Mrs. Dallow had shown, but with something additional, a faint, dry curiosity that suggested she found people interesting in the way that naturalists find insects interesting. "Sit down," she said. Isolde sat. "You're a Dorset woman." "I was stationed in Dorset, my lady. I am from Wiltshire originally." "Wiltshire." The old woman considered this. "What part?" Isolde named a village 30 miles from where she had actually grown up. She had researched it carefully. The Dowager asked her 3 more questions about the village, 2 of which Isolde was able to answer with confidence, and 1 of which she navigated by saying that she had lived mostly on the outskirts, closer to the neighboring parish. The old woman listened with an expression that gave nothing away. "My grandson will be here tomorrow," she said finally. "He has decided that Ashverton requires his attention." There was something in the way she said it. His attention? That made Isolde look up. He is not unreasonable," the Dowager continued, as if she had noticed Isolde's attention and was choosing to address it. "But he has opinions about how things ought to be done, and he expresses them. You will find it best not to take it personally." "I rarely take things personally, my lady." The old woman looked at her. "Everyone takes things personally, Miss Everly. The ones who claim otherwise are either lying or haven't been paying attention." Isolde found, to her own surprise, that she almost smiled. The Duke arrived the next morning at 10:30, when Isolde was in the garden with the Dowager, who was examining her roses with the focused attention of a general assessing terrain. She heard the horses before she saw them. The sound of a carriage coming up the drive, which was on the far side of the house, though the echo carried. The Dowager heard it too, and did not look up from the rose she was inspecting for signs of blight. "That will be Malachi?" she said. Isolde had learned the Duke's name from Mrs. Dallow the previous evening. Malachi Rowan, the Duke of Ashverton. She had known of the title, of course. She had known that the estate had passed to the ducal line through a legal arrangement her father had entered into before he died, one that she had spent 3 months trying to understand and 2 months trying to contest. She had not known the man. She kept her eyes on the rose garden and waited. He came into the garden 10 minutes later, which surprised her. She had expected him to go first to the house, to change from travel clothes, to do the things men of his rank typically did when they arrived somewhere. Instead, he came directly, still in his riding coat, and if he was dusty from the road, he did not appear to have noticed. He was taller than she had imagined, which was foolish. She had not imagined him at all, or told herself she hadn't. He had his grandmother's gray eyes. He greeted the Dowager with what seemed like genuine warmth, and then turned and looked at Isolde with the efficient, impersonal assessment of a man who was accustomed to cataloging his household at a glance. "My new companion," the Dowager said. "Miss Everly. Miss Everly." He nodded, already looking away, back toward the house. "The east fountain needs attention, grandmamma. I noticed on the way in. The stonework is cracking. The east fountain has been cracking for 30 years, the Dowager said. It is characterful. It will be expensive, is what it will be. He said it without heat, a simple statement of fact, and turned to walk back toward the house. Then he paused and said, without looking back, "Miss Everly, the boots on the back terrace want cleaning, the ones left outside the gunroom door. See to it when you have a moment." He did not wait for her response. She watched him go. The dowager was watching her. "Well," the old woman said, not unkindly, "now you've met Malachi." Isolde looked down at the rose she had been standing beside. It was a pale yellow one, an old variety. Her mother had planted it the summer she was born and named it for her, a private joke between herself and Isolde's father. Not the official name, but the name they had called it in the family, between themselves. She had not expected this to be the moment that undid her, but for 3 full seconds she could not speak. "He means nothing by it," the dowager said quietly. "The boots." "I know," Isolde said. And she did know, and it made no difference at all. She cleaned the boots. There were 3 pairs of them, left outside the gunroom, in the way that men leave things when they are accustomed to someone else attending to what they leave behind. She found the cleaning kit in the cupboard where it had always been kept. Another of those small, painful recognitions that she had begun to lose count of, and she sat on the terrace step in the afternoon light and cleaned them. While she worked, she thought about Mr. Greaves. Mr. Greaves was a solicitor in Halifax. He was the man she had been traveling to see when she had received the letter at the coaching inn. The letter from her father's former solicitor, Mr. Aldous Price, informing her that the estate had been conveyed by deed to the ducal line of Ashverton nearly 14 months ago, on the strength of a document she had never seen, which her father had apparently signed 18 months before his death. She had spent those 3 months pulling at every thread she could find. She had written letters. She had hired her own solicitor, a small firm in Edinburgh that came recommended by her mother's cousin, who was the only family member still speaking to her. She had read and reread the conveyance documents until she could recite the pertinent clauses from memory. What she had found at the end of all of it was this: the document was probably legitimate. Probably. Her father had been ill in his last 2 years, but he had not been incompetent, and whatever his reasons, and she had spent many sleepless hours imagining them, he had signed the estate over, and the law appeared to be content with it. What she had also found was a single clause, tucked into the 4th page of the original settlement, which stated that any unmarried daughter of the Vain-Corin family who had reached her majority and had not been provided for through the estate's disposition might petition for a life interest in a specified portion of the property, provided she could demonstrate continuous connection to the estate over a period of not less than 2 years. She had been abroad for 3 years. Her aunt had taken her to the continent after her mother died, and she had stayed because there had been no particular reason to come back. She had returned to England 6 months after her father's death to find the estate already conveyed and herself provided for, nominally, through a small annuity that was generous enough to seem reasonable and insufficient enough to make clear that she was not expected to be a real presence in the discussion. Continuous connection. 2 years. She had barely 6 months of documented presence in England, and only weeks since she had set foot in this county. This was why she was here. Not to contest the conveyance, not to make herself known. She needed time. She needed to be in this house, connected to it in some way that could be demonstrated if it came to a legal argument, while she worked through what options remained. The boots were done. She set them back in a neat row, handle of the cleaning brush tucked inside the nearest pair as she had always seen it done, and stood up and looked out over the garden. The east fountain was visible from here. It was cracking, just as the Duke had said. She could see the hairline fracture along the basin's left edge from where she stood. Her father had had that fountain installed when she was 4 years old. She remembered standing on a wooden box to see over the edge, watching the coins her mother threw, catch the light as they sank. There was a woman arriving in 2 days. Isolde learned this from the kitchen, where she had begun to take her evening tea and where information moved with the efficiency of something well practiced. Her name was Miss Sibella Fairborn. She was the daughter of a viscount, 23 years old, and she was coming at the invitation of the Duke's mother, who was currently in Bath, but had, apparently, been corresponding with the Fairborn family for the better part of the year. Mivos. The kitchen's view of this was that Miss Fairborn was handsome and well-connected, and that His Grace would find himself engaged before the month was out if his mother had anything to say about it. Isolde listened to all of this while drinking her tea and pretending to read a letter she had already read. When she went up to bed that night, she sat at the small desk in her room and thought, carefully, about what the arrival of Sibella Fairborn meant. It meant that the Duke's attention would be directed elsewhere. That was useful. It also meant that the household would reconfigure around a guest of social standing, which would give Isolde less freedom of movement, not more. And it meant, though she told herself this was not relevant, that she should not allow it to be relevant, that she would spend the next several weeks watching a woman be courted for this house, shown through these rooms, invited to admire the fountain and the rose garden and the east passage with its rose-colored curtains. She blew out the candle and sat in the dark for a while. She had known this would be difficult. She had planned for difficulty. She had not planned for what it actually felt like, which was something she did not have a precise word for. Not grief exactly, not anger exactly, something that lived between the two and made itself known in inconvenient moments. She went to sleep telling herself that she was here to do a job, and that the job was going. Sibella Fairborn arrived on a Tuesday in a carriage that was slightly too fine for the occasion, which told Isolde a great deal before the woman had descended the steps. She was indeed handsome. Isolde had prepared herself for this and found that preparation was not especially useful. Miss Fairborn had dark hair and an easy social manner, and the particular confidence of someone who had been told all her life that she was precisely what was wanted. She was also, in the first 24 hours, consistently kind to the staff and genuinely attentive to the dowager, which complicated Isolde's ability to simply dislike her. The Duke's manner with Miss Fairborn was polite and attentive and entirely unreadable. He was not cold, and he was not warm, and Isolde watched him. When she had occasion to be in the same room, which was more often than one might expect, since the dowager treated her companion as a kind of portable furniture who could be positioned wherever convenient, and found she could not determine whether he was a man doing his duty or a man who wanted something he hadn't allowed himself to want yet. She saw the moment things began to shift. It was the third afternoon of Miss Fairborn's visit. The dowager had asked Isolde to fetch a particular book from the library, a volume of correspondence belonging to the previous countess, which the old woman periodically wanted to read, and which was kept on a high shelf near the east window, because Isolde's mother had put it there. Isolde had not known it was there until Mrs. Dallow mentioned it. She had found it on the first occasion, already knowing exactly which shelf it would be on. She was on the library steps, reaching for the volume, when the Duke came in. He stopped when he saw her. She came down the steps with a book in her hands, and found him looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. "You knew where it was," he said. She had not needed to look. She had gone directly to the shelf, directly to the book, the way you go to something that has always been in a particular place. "Mrs. Dallow told me," she said. A pause. "Mrs. Dallow has been housekeeper here for 4 years," he said. "She wouldn't have known where my great-grandmother's correspondence was shelved." Isolde held the book. She had been carrying it casually, spine out, and she turned it so the title faced inward, which was a foolish thing to do and too late. "Forgive me," she said. "I must have been told when I arrived. I don't remember precisely." He looked at her for another moment. Then he said, "I see," and moved to his desk and sat down, and Isolde left. In the corridor outside, she stood still for a moment and breathed. She had been careful. She had been careful every moment, in every room, about every small thing. And she had gone directly to that book without thinking, because she had known where it was since she was 10 years old, and her mother had put it there and said, "This is the family correspondence I sold. You should know where it lives." She told the solicitor everything in a letter she wrote at 2 in the morning, sitting in her room with the window open to the night air, which smelled of the kitchen garden and the rosemary her mother had planted. Mr. Greaves's last letter had contained a small piece of news. There was a secondary clause in the conveyance documents, one that his clerk had found while reviewing the original settlement papers, that placed a condition on the disposition of the estate should any legitimate heir be present at Ashverton Park in a capacity of residence for a continuous period exceeding 60 days. The language was old, and Mr. Greaves's view was that it would require a judge to interpret, and that judges were expensive and slow, but that it existed, and that its existence was significant. 43 days. She had been here 43 days. She sealed the letter and set it on the desk and looked at it for a while. 17 days. She needed 17 more days. The sound of footsteps on the gravel below her window surprised her. She looked out and saw the Duke, which was unexpected enough that she simply looked at him for a moment before pulling back from the window. He was standing in the kitchen garden in the dark, and he appeared to be looking at the rosemary. The following morning he came to find her. She was with the Dowager, reading aloud from a volume of letters, not the family correspondence, which she had returned to its shelf as if it weighed nothing, but a published collection, safe and impersonal. When the door opened, and the Duke came in and stood in that way he had, taking up space with a kind of unconscious first day, and not stopped noticing since. "Grandmama," he said, "I wonder if I might have Miss Everly for a short while." The Dowager looked at him over her reading spectacles. "For what purpose?" "I have a question about the East Wing accounts." Mrs. Dallow thought Miss Everly might be helpful. This was not a convincing reason, and all three of them knew it. The Dowager's expression communicated that she knew it. But she waved her hand and said, "Very well, don't keep. We are at a good part." Isolde set down the book and followed the Duke out. He did not take her to the East Wing. He took her to the library, which she had expected, and he closed the door and stood in the middle of the room and looked at her with the gray eyes that were so like his grandmother's and so unlike anything she had been prepared for. "Who are you?" he said. "Miss Everly, I have already." "Who are you?" he said again, not raising his voice. Isolde looked at him for a long time. She thought about the 17 days. She thought about Mr. Greaves's letter and the secondary clause and the word residing. She thought about the boots she had cleaned on the terrace step, and the book on the high shelf, and the rosemary, and the coin her mother had thrown into the fountain, and how she had pressed herself flat against the wall of the East Passage. On her second day here, when she had heard someone coming, her heart going too fast, because she had forgotten, for just a moment, that she was supposed to be a stranger here. "My name is Isolde Vane Corin," she said. "My father was the 4th Viscount of this estate. I was born in the room that is now your study." The Duke did not speak. "I am not here to take anything from you," she continued, before he could say whatever he was forming. "There is a clause in the conveyance documents. I believe you may already know it exists, or your solicitor does. I need 60 days of documented residence to petition for a life interest in a portion of the property. I have 43. I am not asking for the estate. I am asking for 17 days. Silence. Then he said, "How long have you known where things are kept in this house?" She almost said, "All my life." she said, instead, a very long time. He turned away from her and walked to the window, the east window, where the shelf of family correspondence was, where she had given herself away, and looked out at the garden. "My solicitor did tell me about the clause," he said. "He told me it was minor, that it was unlikely to be activated. He may have been right. I don't know yet. You cleaned my boots." There was something strange in his voice when he said it. Not anger, not exactly. "Yes, you sat on the terrace step and cleaned my boots." He turned. "You who were born in this house." "I made a choice," she said, "about how to proceed. I stand by it." He looked at her. She looked back at him. This was the moment she had rehearsed for, in various forms for weeks. The discovery, the confrontation, the part where she would be calm and clear and give him no reason to feel that she was asking for pity. She was calm. She was clear. She did not feel calm. 17 days, he said. Yes. He was quiet for so long that she began to think she would need to say something else, to fill the silence, which she had never been good at. Then he said, "You will have them." She had prepared also for this answer. She had known it was possible, had assigned it a probability, had thought about what she would say and how she would say it, and that she would not let it show too much. She had not actually been prepared. "Thank you," she said. "Don't." He said it almost sharply. "Don't thank me. You are not asking for a favor. You are asking for what is legal. There is a difference, and I intend to know it." She nodded, because she could not speak without the risk of something she did not want him to see. The 17 days passed the way difficult things sometimes pass, slowly while they were happening, and then, when they were done, faster in memory than they had seemed at the time. She stayed. She read to the dowager. She managed, with more grace than she had expected, the continued presence of Cybella Fairborn, who remained pleasant and attentive, and who appeared, as the days went on, to become aware that the Duke's attention was moving in a direction that was not toward her. She was not sure when she became aware of it herself. It was a gradual thing, like most true things are. He came to find her more often than could be explained by the East Wing accounts. He asked her questions about the house, real questions about the history of things, the original arrangement of the garden rooms, why the East Passage had rose-colored curtains when everything else was blue and cream. And she answered them carefully, and then less carefully, and then simply told him the truth. Her mother had chosen them, had brought the fabric from Edinburgh, had spent a week getting the color right. He listened when she spoke. That was what she noticed. He listened the way people listen when they are actually interested, not the way people listen when they are waiting for their turn. Miss Fairborn departed gracefully, and if she was disappointed she did not show it, and Isolde found that she could not quite dislike her, even at the end. On the day Mr. Greaves's confirmation arrived, the petition accepted, the life interest granted, the portion of the estate formally recognized. She was in the kitchen garden, doing nothing in particular, standing among the rosemary the way she sometimes stood there, just to be near it. The Duke found her there. He had the letter, or rather she had the letter, and he had clearly seen her face when she read it, and he stood a little way off in the manner of a man who is uncertain of his welcome and knows it. "Good news?" he said. "Yes." She looked at the rosemary. "Yes, it is good news." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I should tell you that I have been in contact with my own solicitor about the original conveyance. There are aspects of it that he describes as irregular." She looked at him. He was unwilling to be more specific in writing. The Duke said, "But he intends to visit next month, and I thought, if you were still here, you might wish to be present for that conversation." She was still for a long moment. "Are you telling me," she said carefully, "that the conveyance itself may not hold?" "I am telling you that my solicitor used the word irregular, which is a very deliberate choice of word for a solicitor." He paused. I would not want to give you expectations I could not support, but I thought you should know." She looked at him for a long time. She had come here with a purpose that was narrow and specific, and she had kept herself to it, had not allowed herself to want anything beyond what was legally possible. She had not planned for this. She was not sure she had a plan for this at all. "Why?" she said. "Because this is your house," he said. "It has always been your house. I have been the trustee of something that was not mine to have kept." Something moved in his expression. "I knew it, from the beginning. I think I knew it." The kitchen garden was very quiet. The rosemary smelled the way it had always smelled. She thought about the girl who had stood on a wooden box to see the coins in the fountain. She thought about her mother pressing the curtain fabric flat and saying, "There, that is the right color. That is what this passage has always needed." She thought about coming back to England to find everything signed and settled and herself neatly arranged for. The small annuity, the comfortable exile, the clear message that she was not expected to make a fuss. She had made a fuss, quietly, carefully, on the back terrace with a cleaning brush, but she had made it. "I would like," she said, "to be present for that conversation." "I thought you would," he said. He offered his arm to walk back toward the house, which was a formal gesture for a kitchen garden, and she was aware of this, and he was clearly aware of this, and she took it anyway. The fountain in the east garden caught the afternoon light. The crack in the basin was visible from here, her father's fountain, her mother's rosemary, the rose-colored curtains in the passage above them where the window was catching the sun. She had not expected to be walking back toward the house on the arm of the Duke of Ashverton. She had not expected any of this, which was perhaps the only thing she should have expected, because her mother had told her once that houses have a way of calling their people back, and that the ones who belong to a place always find their way home. She had thought, at the time, that this was a lovely thing for her mother to say, and probably not true. She was beginning to revise that opinion.